Delinquency webinar. I'm Amy Jacobs, the president of NECCD. It's my pleasure to welcome you here today. NECCD is committed to preserving a variety of training opportunities, and we'd like to thank this year's Vermont Conference Committee and Julie Bielko, our Technology Committee Chair, for organizing this event. This year's theme, Rising to New Criminal Justice Challenges, encompasses many aspects of the past year. The restrictions of the pandemic have pushed and pulled us in many ways, personally and professionally. We hope this and future webinars will bring a host of ideas and skills to our field. To get us started, please know that this webinar is being recorded. Please remain on mute and keep your video off during the training. There'll be an opportunity for Q&A at the end. For your information, attendance certificates, training materials, and a brief survey will be sent to your email. For any licensed social workers who have requested CEUs, please put your name and CEU in the chat now so that we may take attendance. For those individuals, a separate email will be sent out. Just to clarify, everyone will receive an attendance certificate and the licensed social workers will receive CEU verification in a separate email. Now I'm going to hand this off to Sarah Turcott, who is the Peer Support Training Officer for the Vermont Department of Corrections, to introduce our presenters. Sarah?
Awesome, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? I think that's the saying of 2020 and 2021. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So I have the pleasure of introducing our two presenters today, starting with Lori Gurney. So Lori is a clinical psychologist licensed in the state of Vermont. She's been working with first responders for approximately 15 years. Has also been in private practice for 20 years. She is a certified trauma specialist. She's certified in critical incident stress management, known as CISM, certified in eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is known as EMDR. And then she is also certified in HeartMath. She's currently contracted with us in the Vermont Department of Correction as our Department of Corrections Wellness Coordinator, and she also is contracted with the Vermont Department of Public Safety as the managing clinician for their team. Additionally, we have Christian Ryan Pagano joining us, who is also an employee of Vermont Department of Corrections. He is currently a corrections service specialist out of our Northeast Correctional Complex in St. Johnsbury. Christian is a 2013 graduate from UVM with a bachelor's in English. He was hired originally as a temporary corrections officer in 2015 and then became permanent. And he was promoted to correctional officer 2 and then on tons of promotions into this position of corrections service specialist. He is a former member of one of our tactical teams, the Vermont Special Response Team, and he's currently our team leader for peer support. He's been a member since 2018, and then he became our entire squad leader, overseeing our group since January of 2020. And so without further ado, I will pass this over to Lori and Christian, who will be presenting today.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Christian Ryan Pagano. Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. I think you pretty much covered everything for me as far as my work history and my credentials. Lori?
Yeah, me as well. We're happy to be here and really appreciate you guys all being here and the time that you're taking to hear our information around peer support.
So we're just going to start our presentation, and I believe there will be a question and answer period at the end if anybody has anything they want to bring up. So once we can get the PowerPoint up, we'll get started. All right. So as was mentioned at the top of the of the meeting. This is going to be just a presentation as an overview of the Vermont Department of Corrections peer support team. What the structure is like, what services we provide, and the benefits of having a similar program like this in your agency if you work in public safety. Next slide, please. So peer support is made up of a group of volunteer DOC employees from around the state. We have, among our ranks, we have people from all across the spectrum of different positions throughout the department. We have, as was mentioned before, I'm myself, I'm a corrections services specialist, commonly referred to as a caseworker in the department. We have line staff, correctional officers ones. We have correctional officer twos who are in more of a middle leadership position. We have correctional facility shift supervisor. We have multiple probation and parole officers. Yeah, we have people with all different levels of experience and time in and having worked in different aspects of the department. So the team brings a wide variety of levels of experience that we can use to provide support to people all across the department. Every team member attends what we refer to as a peer support basic training, which over the years has changed here and there as far as length and the exact content. Usually spans anywhere between 3 to 5 full days of training. Recently, at our last basic, which was last, I want to say October or November, we made the transition to fully integrating what's called critical incident stress management into our basic training. So that has kind of become the model by which we train all of our volunteer team members. We average a recruiting period one a year, and as the team has grown and has gained a more prominent role in the department, we've managed to get growing levels of interest. So hopefully we can continue that as we move through this year and whenever we're able to do our next period of recruiting. And we'll be getting more into detail about what exactly critical incident stress management is as we go on into this PowerPoint. Next slide, please. So what we have here is kind of just an overview of the various services that peer support provides. I think it's fair to say that no matter what level in the department you're working in, or whether you're in a correctional facility or in a field office, working in corrections tends to be a pretty stressful job. Between just the work we have to do day to day, the kinds of interactions we need to have in our work, and various sources of stress from our jobs that we have to deal with, between the stuff we have to do every day and paperwork and reports and the things we may see or hear. So peer support is intended to assist our staff with dealing with the stress related to the work, both on a day-to-day basis as well as the kinds of cumulative stress that we see people develop over time. Along with that, it leads to the possibility that we're going to have staff seeing really difficult things that are extremely difficult to process, situations where there's a lot of violence. Unfortunately, occasionally we have assaults in facilities, we have assaults in the field. We have offenders that attempt, or at times, unfortunately, are able to complete a suicide in a correctional facility. inmates that engage in other forms of non-lethal self-harm, but still nevertheless very difficult to witness and have to put a stop to. When things like this happen in the department, peer support's intended to provide as immediate a response as possible to provide assistance to the staff that were involved in an event, to try to mitigate the short-term impacts of that, as well as figure out what kinds of long-term needs that person may have going forward. In our conversations, we often find ourselves, just in general expressing compassion to our fellow staff, making them aware that there are people in the department that are not blind or deaf to the things that they're dealing with, and acknowledge that those things can be extremely difficult, and make sure they don't feel alone, which goes hand in hand with normalizing their reactions to stress and to trauma, making staff understand that 9 times out of 10, the things that they're thinking and feeling are extremely normal, that they don't need to feel like they're out on an island somewhere dealing with this extremely difficult thing that nobody else understands, because a lot of the people in the department, and more specifically on peer support, have been in either the same or very similar situations in their own experiences, and are able to tell that person, what you're experiencing is similar to what I've experienced, or what I've seen other people experience. So it's okay to feel what you're feeling.
And Kristen, I don't want to interrupt you, but I just, you're making a really great point with that. And I think just from my years of experience working with peer support teams and working directly with first responders, that normalization actually can prevent PTSD. When you know that what you're feeling is a normal reaction to something that the average person doesn't deal with, it really does change the outcome moving forward. So it can't be overstated enough.
Thank you, Lori. And looking at the more long-term health and wellness of staff, part of what we do is sharing coping strategies. Trying to help people figure out things that they can do for themselves, or for themselves and their families, to make dealing with whatever they have going on easier. Find healthy, effective ways for them to process what they're dealing with. Encouraging them to do things that they enjoy, making time for sleep, making time for the things that they enjoy doing for themselves, prioritizing time with their family as much as possible, and ultimately strengthening staff's resiliency, which in this context, resiliency is referring to one's ability to fully, get back to a level of full functionality, as far as coming back from what they've dealt with, and not necessarily like forgetting it, or like pretending it didn't happen, but being able to carry that, being able to shoulder that while you get back to a place where you're feeling okay, and you're able to do the things that you need to do on a daily basis. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is fairly simple, and kind of ties in with the last slide. We mentioned trauma in this context just means anything that has the capacity to overwhelm, and the kinds of things that correctional staff, both in facilities and outside, have to be prepared to witness or to intervene on, can be very difficult to process. Things that most people don't want to see or hear or be involved with, but it's the nature of the work, and at times is necessary in order to save the life of an offender or a fellow staff member. And without giving people the proper tools to address trauma, both in the short term and the long term, staff are going to have a much harder time surviving in this profession, as well as being able to have a healthy life outside of their work. Lori, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think you covered it.
Okay. Next slide, please. So this just kind of covers the kinds of things that you may encounter working in corrections that can lead to trauma. We mentioned, assaults. Staff unfortunately do get assaulted. Staff are also very often made to intervene in assaults that take place between offenders in the facilities. Threats are very common. We're, of course, dealing with a population that doesn't want to be in the situation that they're in, and our staff are have the role of making sure that these people stay here for as long as they need to, and that they're following rules in the facilities, that they are behaving in a way that's safe for themselves and for others. Observing violence, unfortunately, sometimes suicide or death. There are suicides or attempted suicides in correctional facilities, but sometimes we also have people that pass away by other things as well, illness or other kinds of causes that are not related to violence. Probation and parole officers, community correctional officers, having to arrest people out in the fields outside of the correctional facilities, going into people's homes, at times having to bear witness to the dysfunction in some of these people's lives, with spouses, children, and the very upsetting nature of the very upsetting nature of having to witness the effect that our jobs and what we have to do can have on the people in offenders' lives. And another aspect of traumatic stress in corrections is, staff do sometimes get accused of unlawful or unethical conduct that needs to be addressed. Can require lengthy investigations, people being put out on leave for long periods of time with, not always a lot of information about what's going on. Leaving, people can be left feeling in the dark about their situation and unsure about their job. That can obviously be an extremely difficult thing for them. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide is just kind of breaking down the various sources of stress that people working in corrections face. So we kind of touched on the environmental aspects of the work. Working in a correctional facility, inmates, they're somewhere that they don't want to be. They're separated from their family, from their friends, from their work, whatever they have going on the outside. They're being held in a place they don't want to be and separated from those things. That can obviously lead to a lot of tension when our staff have to wake these people up, have them eat, basically, dictating how their entire day is structured from one to the next. It can lead to some very uncomfortable situations with, having to give direction to inmates and having to tell them what to do throughout the day. The potential for violence is always there, as we mentioned. Critical incidents that involve assaults or attempted suicide, and the nature of the work, which is balancing the authoritative side as well as trying to act as a role model. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I didn't know I could turn my camera on. For a while, I didn't have the permission. So there. The organizational aspects of the job that can be stressful. A lot of overtime. That's an issue that our correctional facilities deal with pretty much all the time, but especially with the last year of COVID and people getting put out on, to quarantine, or people that tested positive having to go out. Obviously, that leads to a lot of coverage that's needed. by the people that are still there. So people are working really long hours with sometimes not a lot of time in between their shifts. Report writing, pretty much anything that happens in a facility or in a probation and parole office requires a report. So having to find the time to do those in a timely manner, make sure they're accurate, making sure that they include all the necessary details regarding an incident, while trying to balance that with everything else that you're doing. Processes, so directives, the rules that we have to follow always changing, especially during COVID, when from one week to the next, the safety measures we have to take to keep ourselves and the offender safe, that has been always in flux, depending on recommendations from the Department of Health. And then this is inevitably going to lead to stress that involves our interpersonal relationships. Our time with our families and our friends are impacted by the overtime that we work, or how just exhausted that people who work in corrections may be when they come home. Coworkers, we aren't always going to get along with the people that we have to work with, but we have to do it anyway, and that can lead to some uncomfortable situations. And ultimately, our personal well-being being impacted. If you're working a lot of overtime, if you're finding yourself exhausted just from your work day, and just feeling too tired to do anything outside of work, you're not necessarily going to have the time or the energy to do the things that you would normally do to keep yourself feeling good, working out, reading, spending time with people, the things that we normally do to keep ourselves feeling healthy and content. People in corrections are faced with the necessity to restructure their lives and their day-to-day life, and those activities may end up falling to the wayside. Next slide, please. Lori, would you be able to speak to what's on this slide? Lori, can you hear me?
All right, Lori, you're now unmuted. Do you want to start again?
Thank you. The overall goals when we're using crisis intervention is to lower the tension, to lower the overall anxiety and stress that's associated with whatever event that we're working with. One of the things that helps when you're sitting and doing a one-on-one, working with an individual, is to really help them to know that, like Christina said, it's normal. What they're feeling and how they're reacting to the situation is a normal reaction. One of the things that we always make sure that we do when we're using a one-on-one technique or when we're using a group technique is to make sure that we're helping the people that are involved to reconnect with those resources. Because what happens when we're in a critical situation is oftentimes we forget the tools that we already have in our tool bag. So it's really important that we help people to remember how to utilize the things that they know how to do and that's worked for them in the past. The overarching goal is to restore people back to their previous level of functioning. If there's a situation where people are not being as resilient as they once were, that's where the team will make a referral. And I'm part of that referral process. And then we also work with a clinician out of Essex Junction, Beth Jacobs. She's been phenomenal for the department. She's taken on every referral that we've sent her way. She's fantastic. She's also really well versed in trauma. So when we have people that are struggling, we have a path in front of us, and we have a bank of people that we can refer to based on what people need. Kristen, you want to add anything, or Sarah?
No, I think you pretty much covered it, Lori.
I would just add that that piece can be really difficult for an individual that is on the peer support team, and that's something we always are continually working on, is really detecting the point in a conversation where it goes from a conversation from a peer support member to a level of clinical support that members on the team are not licensed to really assist with.
Right. And drawing that line and knowing where to draw that line kind of leads into this what's on this next slide here, which is regarding confidentiality. So, you know, I don't know how many people that are on this work in corrections, but I don't think it's unfair to say that people in that work in corrections do have a history of having a hard time opening up about you know, the stresses that they're dealing with at work. For a really long time, correction staff have been trained to not want to talk about it, to convince themselves at all times that they're okay, that they can handle it, and you know, just not. And by opening up about stuff, they may be afraid that they are going to appear weak to their coworkers, and so it's been a long process trying to shift the culture in a way that makes staff feel like it is okay to talk about stuff that they're dealing with that's difficult for them. But a big part of building that trust that it's okay to talk about these things is the assurance that what a staff member tells a member of peer support is going to remain between them. Now, so confidentiality is one of our number one priorities when talking to staff, but confidentiality cannot be maintained absolutely. There are certain situations where we aren't going to be able to keep what's talked about between us and that staff member, and those situations are covered here on the slide. So anytime an employee is presenting a clear and present danger to themselves or to someone else, if they're talking about things that indicate that they're engaging in work rule violations or anything that is that could constitute a violation of the law. So for our team members, we encourage them to, you know, do make every possible effort to, if it seems like the person that they're talking to is steering the conversation in a direction that leads to something where confidentiality can't be protected, our team members are told to firmly but gently tell that person, you know, we're going into territory that that our confidentiality cannot protect. So let me get you in touch with someone who's who is able to uphold confidentiality in a way that's more absolute, so that, you know, whatever it is that you want to talk about, you can talk about it with them, and you can feel safe doing that, and not have to be concerned that whatever it is going to have to get reported. Because and while that may seem, you know, it's a difficult thing to do. It's difficult to stop a conversation, stop someone from opening up about something that may be very difficult for them to talk about. But ultimately, it's in the best interest of both sides of that conversation, because, you know, we want our staff to get the help that they need and the support that they need. But if a staff member is talking about something that we can't keep confidential, that's going to lead to the team member then having to report what's been talked about, and then that team member has, in the eyes of the staff member, has broken that trust, eroded any faith that person might have built in being able to come to peer support about stuff. It's going to, which is of course going to most likely make the situation even more traumatic for that person, because now not only are they dealing with whatever the situation is, but now it's being reported to their supervisors, and something's being investigated, and the team member is now roped into whatever investigation may have to take place from there. So it's just a really, really not good outcome for everyone involved, which is why it's so important that our team members know that when things are crossing into this kind of territory, that the conversation has to be put on hold so that we can get them referred to someone who can better help them. Lori, do you have anything you want to add about that?
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that the CISM training that the peers get, the 3 days of CISM training, the first day is individual, how to assisting individuals. And so what they are, the team itself are very trained in how to ask questions that don't necessarily get to specific involvements and incidents at work. It's really more about the individual themselves, how they're feeling, how they're doing, what their coping strategies are, that along that line. So it's very rare that the team is put in this situation. I mean, do you guys think that's fair to say, that it's a rare occurrence that this is something that happens?
I would say that it's rare, but if it happens and the situation isn't handled appropriately, the few and far between are enough that it would be pretty bad for everybody if these situations were not managed properly.
And when somebody is sort of told, you know, that's as far as we can go, there's an immediate referral. There's an immediate connection to me, to Beth potentially. But that's my role in the department, to be that support for the team, to be that clinical oversight, so that if that wall is ever reached, there's somebody that immediately can step in and can hear anything they have to say and can remain completely confidential.
Yes. And Lori's always been very good about, you know, being available at odd hours of the day, you know, as needed for staff that need those referrals.
Yeah, I
Next slide.
think it's, oh, hold on one sec. Sorry, Christian. I also would like to add that, especially when we're talking about confidentiality, it's really important to provide an environment that people feel comfortable talking. And so a lot of times our work is done outside of the facility or the field site that we're working at, whether it be like on the phone or through other like social media platforms, especially with COVID. But typically people don't feel as comfortable being transparent and talking about what they're experiencing sometimes when they're in a facility surrounded by all of their peers, because some of what may be adding to their stress or how they're feeling could be those individuals that are in the locker room where they're trying to have those conversations. So we always try and find a way to be mindful of the spaces that we're in, to try and provide a place that is safe and comfortable. And then if it comes to a point where someone would rather, you know, talk at a different time, maybe when they're off shift, that's something we typically provide because we're really a 24/7 operation.
Yes. Thank you, Sarah. And 24/7 is not an exaggeration.
No, it is not.
No. You know, we have staff that work all different hours. So our staff are, we have lots of people who sleep during the day and are awake at night. So, you know, we don't necessarily do all of our work on a regular 9 to 5 schedule. Is just to put it plainly. Next slide, please. All right. So this is just breaking down the dual approach of peer support as far as what we often refer to as responses that are both proactive as well as reactive. So in corrections, the long-standing go-to when it comes to dealing with difficult situations is primarily reactive. Something happens, we respond, you know, write a report, you know, do all the things that you normally do after something happens, and then we all move on. But and that part is important, but the other half is equally important, which is the stuff that we encourage people, the stuff that we do prior to when something happens, so that staff have the tools that they need to you know, go into a situation and come out of it with as little long-term negative impact as possible. So, I mean, things like stress identification and management. So, knowing about the aspects of our work that are likely to cause stress, which is part of what we're doing there in this presentation. Identifying ways that we can effectively manage our stress, which is not going to look the same for everybody. You know, different people like to do different things. Different people find comfort in different things. So knowing the things that we can do for ourselves to manage stress. Self-care, just the things that we enjoy to do, making time for that, time with our families and friends, making sure that we have room in our lives for stuff that is not related to work. And pre-incident training. So, you know, knowing the various ways that we need to respond to an incident, so that when those things happen, we have a pretty good idea going in about what we're going to need to do. And resources. So things like the various services that EAP provides, people take advantage of that. And knowing about peer support, which is part of this training, and being able to find other resources like Lori or Beth that provide services that, you know, EAP or peer support may not be able to provide. The response side of that, you know, entails peer support, following up with individuals, holding debriefings or defusings as part of the CISM material that we're all trained on, which again, we're going to get into a little bit more. And, you know, having the knowledge about resources is good. But not everyone's necessarily going to have that information readily available. So making sure that those people are referred to appropriate resources as needed. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide is just a general, is kind of an overview of the various kinds of referrals or responses that peer support may, you know, find ourselves engaging in within the department. You know, a critical incident, which, you know, we've talked about a bit already, something that happens at a facility or out in the field that has the potential to cause trauma to those that were involved, to inhibit our staff members' ability to do their job effectively, or it, you know, has a potential to impact their ability to, you know, just be, you know, a healthy, functioning human, both outside and inside work. So some of that happens. Peer support is notified of the situation. Usually that would be directly to me, the team leader, or to Cindy Lack, who's the assistant team leader, depending on who's available. You know, getting a little bit of detail about what exactly happened, who was impacted, you know, if people were, if there was some kind of assault, like what were the extent of any injuries that staff may have, you know, had done to them. Or sometimes it may not be staff that are injured. Maybe it's an offender that's been hurt, or unfortunately sometimes worse. And once we have those details and who's going to need our assistance, figuring out the best way to do that, whether it's through individual follow-ups with staff that were involved, or doing something that's more of a group intervention, like a debriefing or a defusing through CISM. And then afterwards, you know, continuing to follow up with the affected staff once we've addressed needs in the immediate aftermath, continuing to follow up with those people to make sure that they have what they need, if any additional resources are needed. And then the other two kinds of referrals we receive are more individualized. We do have staff that, thankfully, as peer support has become more visible and known in the department, you know, people being able to recognize in themselves that they need help, and, you know, either finding out there's someone else or being aware already of peer support team members that are available at their facility or somewhere nearby, and taking it upon themselves to reach out and say, I'm having a hard time. I'm looking for some kind of assistance or support. And, peer support a team member will take it from there, refer them to additional resources as well if it's needed. And then occasionally we do have management referrals, which can be, management refers to a supervisor, some kind of supervisory position, but really, more broadly, we referrals get made by just fellow coworkers. It doesn't necessarily have to be a supervisor or a superintendent, district manager, whatever. If someone in our department recognizes that someone else that they know is dealing with something difficult, we would fully encourage them to take it upon themselves to reach out to us and say, hey, I noticed that this person has been, calling out sick a lot. When they are here, they just don't seem to be in the right frame of mind, seem very distracted, just not themselves. Sometimes that's how some of our best work is done, when it's just a coworker recognizing that someone else that they work with is just not quite themselves recently and might need some kind of help. And sometimes it may not end up being anything that's a big deal. Maybe they just, had an off week or something, but other times it can be something much more serious than that. And those are the kinds of situations that really necessitate a timely response. So it's those situations it's extremely helpful when we have staff that are willing to do that for their coworkers. It's the kind of environment that I think that we should all want to work in, where we're all willing to help each other and look out for each other. Next slide, please. All right, Lori, I'm going to let you take this one. The difference between defusings and debriefings under CISM. Lori's muted again.
I can't unmute myself.
Can hear you now.
Can you?
Yeah.
Okay. The team follows a critical incident stress management model, and that's through the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation out of Baltimore, Maryland. The foundation itself has been around since about 1989 when this research began. So I think it's just important to note that the protocols that the team utilizes are researched, and they follow this approach very carefully when they're doing interventions, especially group interventions. The team itself is trained, as I said before, in individual one-on-one activities, and then the last 2 days of the training are focused on group interventions, and these are the two interventions that we're going to use most of the time. A defusing happens within 8 hours of the traumatic event or the incident. This one's a little tricky because sometimes it's hard to kind of get all the people that were involved back within that 8-hour stretch, but it's a really important one. What we know is that there's something called a trauma membrane, and that there's a window of opportunity in the first 8 hours of a traumatic event. People are very open to getting help. They're open to talking about what happened. And if we can get to people within that 8-hour window, 8 to 12 hours, that window, it actually can accelerate them moving forward in to recovery that's takes a lot less work. And oftentimes when we do a defusing, we will then move into a debriefing 3 days later. But there are times when a defusing actually does all it needs to do, and it gives people what they need. So a defusing, it's within that first 8 to 12 hours of the event happening. A debriefing happens within 24 to 72 hours. It almost never happens in 24 hours, but it's usually 2 to 3 days out following the event. This is a highly protocoled approach. There's seven phases. And what the team has the capacity to do is to meet people where they're at in their sort of cognitive emotional space, and they move them into a very emotional space where they can kind of get at what's going on. And then through teaching and really acknowledging symptoms, they can move them back into that cognitive realm again, but without the trauma kind of hanging over them. One of the things that Christian said a couple slides ago was that the team provides follow-up. In both of these events, if there's just a diffusing without a debriefing, there's still going to be follow-up. And with a debriefing, there's definitely more intensive follow-up. So it's just important to note that these are things that we provide in the moment, but in my mind and in what I've seen over the course of time, the follow-up is as important as these protocoled approaches. We get it out there, we share what happened, we normalize everything that's gone on, and then we really follow people to make sure that they're okay. A diffusing can be done with just the team. It's just a peer approach, it's peer-to-peer approach. A debriefing cannot be done without a clinical support person who's trained and certified in CISM. So what happens during that debriefing, as strange as it sounds, is my role in a debriefing is to make sure a debriefing doesn't become therapy. That's not the goal of it. The goal is to process through the events that occurred. So, but the other piece that I do while I'm sitting in a debriefing is to assess where people are at. And if there's somebody in that debriefing that needs more than peer support, I'm going to do the follow-up with those particular people. So one is completely peer-driven. The other is peer and clinical-driven. You guys want to add anything about those? I know you both participated in diffusings and debriefings.
So I have a couple things I'd want to add. So as far as the importance of the follow-up, Lori, I don't think it can be overstated, because I think that sometimes that's where we are able to do our best work as far as, establishing trust with coworkers and helping them to establish faith from our department and from our coworkers in these processes and the services that this team provides. Because if we just do the defusing or the debriefing, whatever it may be, and then that's it, and we don't follow up with people, that can come across as, well, okay, they did exactly what they needed to do, and then they were out of here, and they didn't care about making sure afterwards that we were okay. Like, that
Follow-up builds trust. You're absolutely right.
Right. Yeah. If we don't have that, then then what we're doing can come across more as just like we're just going through the motions, we're following the protocol, and then we're just getting out of there, and everyone is supposed to just move on. I think that if we take the time when all eyes aren't necessarily on what we're doing after the fact, and take the time to follow up individually with people, and just in passing, or like taking time out of our day to check in with that one person, that to me demonstrates to them that it's not just about looking like we're doing everything properly when everybody's paying attention. It's also about actually making a good faith effort to make sure that these individuals are doing okay in the days and weeks after whatever happened. Now, as far as my own experience being present for these, I've done a couple defusings, and at least I've done two debriefings, and it can be awkward, to say the least. It can be uncomfortable, because in some situations you're going to be you're sitting in a room, a scheduled gathering in a room at a facility or a work site with a bunch of people that you've never met before prior to this meeting, people who don't necessarily want to be there, who don't necessarily think that there's value in the process that we're following here. And you can feel that, because it's just, in a situation like that, it's just palpable, like who body language, how much or how little someone is willing to say. You can very easily tell where people are at while you're doing one of these, and it can be hard. But by following the steps as we are taught them for the defusings and the briefings, approaching it with compassion and by encouraging people to speak. One of the things that we always say during those meetings is, you're not required to speak, but what you say may help someone else that's here. If you take a moment to say something about what this was like for you, what you say may encourage someone who wants to speak, who may not have spoken if you didn't do it first. But by you speaking first, you're giving that person, they're making it feel like you've given that person the room to say what they feel like they need to say. And that opportunity could make such a huge difference for that person. So, you know, some of the most important aspects of making sure that these processes work is accepting that it's going to be uncomfortable, doing your best to encourage people to be open, accepting that it's not necessarily going to be that way, and doing everything that you can to make the process work for as many of those people as possible. It's difficult, but I can say from what I've seen, as far as the way that it's helped people that were involved in some really difficult stuff, I can say that the process works, and I think that these protocoled approaches are exactly the kind of approach that the Department of Corrections usually goes for, because everything we do is done by protocol. Everything we do has pretty much everything we do has a directive, has a step-by-step thing that we're supposed to follow. And so this isn't just about, you know, we get people in a room to talk about their feelings and that's automatically supposed to make people feel better. It's not like that. You know, it's not that simple. But studies have shown that these processes work, and that if they're followed, and that if you approach it with sincerity and compassion, that it will make a significant difference for people. Not every situation is going to be the same, but overall, there is undeniable benefit to using them.
And I think one of the biggest, when you talk about data, one of the things that we can really look at is the fact that there's been enough data since 1989 to now to really look at the fact that people retire from first responder jobs where there's consistent diffusings and debriefings after following an incident, along with one-on-ones and good follow-up. People retire in a different place, and they don't require ongoing support after retirement. And that's one of the things over the 15 years that
Oh, Lori, you got muted.
effective. And I know that in the other agencies I work for, when I first started, I had a lot of retired people on my caseload, and now I do not. And that says a lot about the work itself, being able to offload the things that happen in this work. And you know, as you all know, working in first responder worlds and in corrections, there's a lot of trauma. And so being able to let go of the big overarching things that happen while still talking about the daily sort of, I call it that sort of drip, drip, drip of traumatic events that happen within corrections, being able to talk about that one-on-one with your peers, and then being able to actually manage the bigger things with the bigger incidents and traumas with diffusings and debriefings. It's life-altering moving forward.
Sarah, did you have anything?
The only thing I wanted to add, so we talked about the follow-up component for diffusings and debriefings, but that's something we also apply just in general as peer supporters, regardless of if diffusing or debriefing is identified as a response to an event. So individually, myself, Christian, other people on the team may be in contact with the same individuals for years because of that support that we've built. And so I just wanted to share that. And obviously, with the pandemic and everything that we've experienced, people have had a new additional stress on top of what they already probably are experiencing. And so one of the things we've done as far as a team is we were meeting weekly, we're now doing bi-weekly. But as a team, we get together and share these sentiments and try and brainstorm how we can provide resources, make ourselves more available to individuals that are experiencing these crises or these traumatic events. And so it's been a heavy lift for everyone on the team, because especially for Christian coming on as our team leader, I don't believe he could foresee that we were going to get hit with a pandemic and then have to take over the team at the same time. And so we've seen a really rapid influx in our our contact standards that we've had with individuals as a result of the pandemic. And those people get followed up with time and time after again as well.
Yes,
Good point, Sarah.
Sarah, I think it is very fair to say that I did not see this coming when I was very carefully deliberating the decision to take this role on. And there is no way to overstate just how much the pandemic affected our team, the way that we do this work, the level of need in the department for it was accelerated in a way that, I mean, you could never have imagined. Staff dealing with the general uncertainty and the frightening nature of COVID and the vast range of operational changes that the facilities have seen and that field offices have seen, with staff reassigned from the field offices to facilities to help with staff shortages, staff who were too afraid to go home because of not wanting to bring home the virus to a family member or a parent, a grandparent, their children. So instead, they were being put up in hotels. So dealing with the major changes of what you're doing at work, as well as the potential consequences that you thought you could be bringing home to your family. I mean, the impact of that is just astronomical, immeasurable. And so naturally, that led to such a dramatic increase in the amount of support that staff needed. While peer support itself, the team members themselves were also trying to navigate this extremely volatile environment as it develops. It's been a very challenging time for everybody, but I think that in the grand scheme of things, in the long term, it has made this team more effective, has better highlighted for the department in general the need for it, and I am very optimistic about the future, both for the team itself and for the department. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
All right. So lastly, I think this, unfortunately, I apologize in advance for this, but I don't think that this flow chart is completely up to date anymore. It needs to be updated. There have been some changes as far as who's in what spot, and we've had a couple people leave the team here and there, but this is the general breakdown of how the team is structured. So obviously we have the team leader, assistant team leader, and the wellness, the clinical support at the top, and then the squad is broken down into the team is broken down into 3 squads by region. So the Northwest squad, which covers the St. Albans and Burlington correctional facilities, as well as the probation and parole offices in those areas. The Southern covers Hartford, the facilities in Rutland and Springfield, and all the probation and parole offices in that area. And the Northeast covers St. Johnsbury, Newport, Barry, Morrisville. I believe that's it. Probably I might be forgetting something, but that's the general breakdown of it. So each squad has a squad leader who are responsible for collecting monthly data from their squads as far as the amount of people that they've made contact with on any given month, and then those are sent up to the assistant team leader, who ultimately tallies everything up. So we're tracking from month to month what kind of numbers we're looking at as far as the amount of people that peer support is making contact with. And this kind of just aligns to what I was just talking about a few minutes ago. Pretty much from the beginning of 2020 on, difference in the amount of contacts that we saw month on month, the increase between before and during that time period was exponential. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I want to say that our amount of our monthly contacts probably at least tripled. So, yeah.
Which I think in a pretty big way speaks to the culture shift. You know, I've been really surprised. I've been with you guys since March of 2020. And so I don't know DOC without COVID. But I think that one of the things that was said is that it's going to be a hard culture to shift. And it really has shifted quite a bit. People are very open to getting the help that they need when they know that there are people there that can offer it. So it's been really incredible to see that.
Yeah, and Lori talks about culture, we come from a kind of a background where a supervisor, an individual would say to someone after an event, do you want peer support? And that individual will be in a place of either saying yes, they're interested, or feeling like they can't say, no, I'm all set. And now we've shifted to a culture where we're connecting you with peer support. Peer support's going to touch base. So then they have that opportunity to engage with that peer support member, because no, not necessarily is the answer at the surface. Another thing I just wanted to touch base on, so Christian was talking about contacts and our numbers. And so going back to that confidentiality piece, when we collect that information, there's no information related to names or individuals on that. It's just how many times you interacted with individuals throughout the month, to respect people's confidentiality. And then the last thing I just wanted to hit on is we were talking about the uptick because of the pandemic, but what's also important is to realize that all these individuals on this org chart also have additional duties and responsibilities. They're either line staff or probation officers, or are working at central office in different capacities. So on top of their normal duties, they're additionally taking on this, which makes it really important to have self-care in place. And another reason why we were meeting on a bi-weekly basis, so that we could support one another, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of others. So really making sure that our well is full as far as self-care opportunities, especially with what's been going on with the pandemic. It looks like maybe we're reaching a light at the end of the tunnel, but.
Thank you, Sarah. I believe that is our last. I think there might be one more slide after this, which is, I think, just an outdated picture. Yes, it is. Okay, so that's all we have. I don't know if we're turning it back to Amy or.
So I think we're going to open things up to questions. If anyone has questions, I know I see a hand raised right now. I have just restored people's ability to unmute themselves. So if you guys want to, if folks want to utilize the hand raise option and then call on folks to unmute themselves with any questions, I think that would work well.
Sounds good. So I see John Wise has their hand raised. John? Yeah, we can see you, but we can't hear you. You're muted. There you go.
Can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Great presentation, by the way. So I don't want to spend too much time because I know a lot of people probably have questions, or some people may. I'm the chair of our peer support team here at Long Creek Youth Development Center in South Portland, Maine. And one of the things that is different about how we run our peer support program here is that each prison, Maine State Prison, MCC, Maine Correction, and us are, we kind of doing our own thing. You know what I mean? It doesn't start with a guy like Christian and then move all down to regions and that kind of thing. And I think that's something that I'd like to see changed, but that's, you know, neither here nor there. Two questions. One is your referral bank, right? what's the approach to getting people who are willing to be, referrals, not referrals, but referred to? Like Laura, people are referred to you, correct?
Right.
Right. And we have one person who, we have a totally separate medical, that's done. It's WellPath. And there's a lot of hesitation by using their psych people. We can't use their psych people. We can use our social workers here that are assigned to each unit. But I'm just wondering how you get that bank up and going. And once after that, do you refer it to the local or the EAP of a particular, state entity? And first of all, and second of all, and this is it, are your defusings and or debriefings mandatory? Because they're per policy, they are mandatory for us.
Okay. And Lori, I'm sure you might have something to add to this as well as far as the referral piece. But the process by which we bring people on, additional people to whom we can make referrals, like someone who is similar to Lori or Beth Jacobs, who's the other clinician that we have. That's we're kind of still working on that. We were only in the past, I don't, Laura, you might remember better than I do, but I mean, It wasn't long before COVID hit that the department was able to, form a contract that brought you on. And we are still in the process of trying to find more clinicians like Lori and Beth who we can bring on in a similar capacity. It's just one of the aspects of what we do that's still in development.
Right.
But and I won't pretend to know the ins and outs of what it entails to contract somebody like a Lori or Beth. But
sure.
We have been having conversations around if we're looking for additional people, what kinds of qualifications are we looking for? Do we want our people, these people, to have experience in certain areas, whether it's with law enforcement like Lori has, or just public safety, like first responders in general, or if there are certain fields of psychology that we think are best suited for helping people that work in corrections. These are all still questions that we're working through. And yeah. So it's I wish I had a more in-depth response to that.
No, I mean, and let me, and I swear that people who know me know that this is crap. I'm going to shut up in a second. But here's the thing, Lori, Christian, and Sarah, are you, is it are your CISMs are they mandatory per policy? And does the VDOC have a policy on peer support?
So we don't have we do have a guidance document for the peer support team that kind of lays out what we do and what protocols we follow. We don't. I do not believe that there is anywhere in what we have in writing that states that our debriefings or our defusings are mandatory. I don't know that anyone has ever really been forced to be present for one.
It's strongly encouraged.
Strongly encouraged. Sure. Yeah, exactly. And I don't think there, so far in the ones that we've done, I don't believe there's ever been a situation where someone whose presence really could have been was integral to,
sure,
like someone who was very directly involved. I don't think we've ever run into someone in that situation refusing to participate. And I think mandating it, while obviously there's the benefit by mandating it, you're making sure that those people are there. I think that there, up to this point, has been some hesitance as far as requiring it, just because we're trying to, we're still trying, as much ground as we've gained, we're still trying to establish, you know, a good faith effort and trust with the people in the department that we're working with. So I think there might be some hesitance around mandating it just because, you know, sometimes the more you tell someone they need to do something, the less interested they're going to be in engaging in it. You know what I mean?
And I think that's true, Christian, absolutely. But John, my take on it is that if you mandate somebody, they have to be there. So they don't feel like anyone's thinking, wow, that person has a problem because they went to the debriefing. Everyone has to go. So it's almost, I realize it's a forced situation, but what we know is that they're going to get something out of it. And we also know that people try to, sometimes it's hard to say, I have a problem and I'm going to go and talk about it. If you make them go, that's a whole different feel. So, I think that the mandate is actually a good idea.
That's a good point, Lori. That's a good point. And
contact information, guys? Is it Christian and Lori and or Sarah? Is there any way I can get your contact information, or we can? So if I got any questions, which I do, I don't want to take up this whole time.
We can, I think it would be appropriate for us to put our emails in the chat. That way you could reach out to us.
And John, I'd be happy to talk more with you about that whole referral process and how that happens.
Okay.
And my role versus like Beth's role and what else we're looking for. I'd be happy to talk more with you about how that looks for Vermont DOC.
And how do you feel about us stealing this PowerPoint?
I mean,
I feel pretty great about it, honestly. I think we're currently doing something with family support. And so we've been so some of us on peer support are assisting with this family support idea. And a lot of this content that we're using is from Behind the Badge from North Carolina and some of the content that they sent on. So I don't see any reason why we can't share that with you.
Well, I'll be in touch with you through the chat real quick. I'm going to shut up now.
I do see that the chat is disabled. I don't know if we can get that turned on just so that we can put our email in there. Okay, perfect. So we'll make sure to put our contact information in.
And I would add with the diffusings and debriefings, we noticed that the more that they happen, the more organically people have more buy-in to attend them in the future, because people go, oh, I went, it wasn't that bad. And so we see more attendance.
Yep. Thank you very much.
And a copy of a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation will be emailed out with everyone's attendance certificates as well. So that's something
great.
that can be accessed. And I believe Craig Ladd has his hand raised.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Hi, thanks. I'm Craig Ladd. I'm a member of the peer support team in Maine for community corrections. And I just have a couple of questions. One, our group, we're in the process of updating our policy, and one of the things that we've talked about around confidentiality, which you touched on in your presentation, was the possible use of a couple of forms that we've considered. One, for lack of a better term, we've called it like an acknowledgement of confidentiality, and then of course a release of information form. I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that, or if you have similar type of forms that you use in your work. And then the other question would be around, does your particular program have any type of like an operational budget specific for peer support?
So to answer the questions about the forms, we don't have forms like that. It's actually it's an interesting idea in that it's not something that I think we've ever really discussed doing, but not necessarily because it's a bad idea. I mean, a form definitely would serve the purpose of, establishing certain boundaries, parameters in which we are providing these services. Sarah, Sarah or Lori, do you have any thoughts on? I guess it's not an idea that I've ever really considered.
Lori is currently muted, but I believe she is trying to say something.
There you
You're
go.
good to go.
I think that my first thought about that when we go back to the CISM training, and I don't know what you guys use in Maine. I don't know if you use CISM or something similar. Going back to that individual one-on-one training that our peers have, there is sort of a built-in process to steer them away from asking questions that would open that door. Doesn't mean that, like Christian and Sarah both said, that it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but a lot of what we consider one-on-ones are really organic. They just happen. And so it would be, at least for what our team does, it would almost seem challenging to be able to present that form. So I'd be curious to know how that works, and if you're talking more about something that's more protocoled versus a really organic kind of just a conversation that happens, because our peers are embedded in their, their correctional facilities or their P&P offices, so people just naturally go to them.
Right.
Yeah,
That's a good
I personally think that as myself, I would see like a form or something be more of a deterrent to have to sign something, and it makes something feel more official. And the more we can steer away from that, and it doesn't seem like it's like a big brother terminology or something, the easier it is to have those conversations. One of the things that we found helpful, we started at the beginning of COVID, was prior to COVID, was going into our various sites, facilitating this training that's also provided to our recruits at the academy, so that they have an understanding of what peer support is, what we're able to do, what we can discuss and cover. So those parameters are really clear without having to have them sign something to understand that speaking with us, if they talk about harm to themselves, others, etc., that it would get reported. And so from the get-go, when they first start working as a correctional officer at the academy, they learn that. And then we're really trying to reinstill this. We did it during a DOC updates, which is open to all staff in the department to attend. So we did a review there. And then I'm sure we're going to continue picking up these trainings that we were delivering that were specific to the field and facilities, so that they have a better understanding of where peer support is for them and what we can assist them with.
Thank you, Sarah and Lori, both. I think those are very good points that I could not summon into my brain at the moment. But Craig, I to add to what Sarah and Lori were saying, some of the most important conversations, most important interactions that peer support team members have with staff are in very informal settings. When we, pre-COVID, when visiting other facilities was more of a thing, if we were responding to a facility and we would just, had a couple team members in the staff lounge available to talk to people, if we had someone among us that was there that, goes out to smoke cigarettes, there are correctional officers that go out on their breaks to smoke cigarettes. And, not to say that this is not an endorsement of smoking, but this is me saying that settings like that, where people are, it's kind of a relaxed setting, and if you go out there and you're having a smoke with someone who's already out there on their break, and you just start having a casual conversation, those are sometimes the best ways to get people to open up, and having a protocoled form that has to be signed, before you get into conversations with somebody. While I could definitely see the benefits as far as like covering bases and setting clear boundaries from the outset, I do think that there would be some of that that, like Lori mentioned, our people are embedded in in this work as well. It's not their job. This isn't their job. This is something they do in addition to their full-time job in the department. So those casual conversations are a lot easier to do if we're able to approach it in a casual way. If we make them sign something first, we may end up in a situation where they're less likely to open up. I guess is the best way I can answer
We
that.
do have confidentiality requirements for members on the team, which might be something you were interested in as well. And so when we are on peer support, we have a commitment letter that holds us accountable to that. And then our squad leaders, Christian as the team leader and Cindy as the assistant team leader, those are all things that they address with our special teams coordinator. If there are concerns around members on the team sharing or disclosing, because that is a huge threat to the integrity of peer support in general. And so I feel pretty confident with our current team. We're in a good spot, but there are things in place for that. And I think your other question was relating to budget. And so I know that there is some budget available for peer support under the special teams umbrella. I don't know what that budget looks like. I know that the individual, Jody Barrier, I believe is actually in attendance on this call, but he typically is the keeper of those keys. He just got promoted into a safety manager position. So it's currently, they're recruiting for that position, interviewing, but typically any things that are allocated as far as training or additional opportunities that have monetary requirements would go through that avenue.
Thank you very much. For the sake of time, I'll leave it at that. I appreciate you guys taking the time to answer my questions.
Thank you, Craig.
And feel free to reach out, Craig, if you have other questions.
Yes. I did put email addresses for myself, Sarah, and Lori in the chat. Everyone should be able to see it. So if you pull up the chat, you'll find it there. If anybody has questions they want to reach out with after we're done here. And I do see that
I think Herb was next,
Herb,
and
yes,
then
Herb.
we'll do Diane after that, and then we'll probably wrap things up because we want to be respectful of everybody's time today.
I'm just super psyched that we're using this time. I was kind of worried that we may not have questions, but I'm glad that we do.
I had a question. One of the slides had, I think, as a stressor, an abbreviation RFD. Now, RFD to me is rural free delivery, but I'm sure it's not that. But I was just curious what that was. Second question is, you're talking about CISM training. I was curious about that. Is that an acronym, CISM? What does it stand for? And could you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yes.
And finally, one other thing is that I know, having been a probation officer for many years and having lost people who were on my caseload in various ways, suicide, overdose, car accident, different things. It seems to me that it would be a good thing. I always thought this, that people have somebody get in touch with them and be proactive. So a lot of times I think it's known around the office that, oh, Joe lost somebody on his caseload or Mary lost somebody on her caseload. But unless Mary or Joe goes to somebody or starts talking about it, I don't think normally people touch base with them on a regular basis. And I don't know if you folks plan to do that or if you are doing that, but I think it would be a good thing to do from my experience.
So Herb, thank you. I want to do my best to answer everything that you asked. So I'll start with RFD, and Sarah did put it in the chat. So RFD refers to relief from duty. So that is when a staff member is under some kind of investigation for in a lot of cases alleged staff misconduct. These staff members, I did touch on this during the presentation. I didn't refer to it by RFD specifically when I talked about it, but investigations that go on for long periods of time, staff are in these situations are home, may feel like they're not getting a lot of updates on what's going on with the investigation, living day to day and not knowing how much longer they're going to have a job or if they will come back to work. So that can be obviously an extremely stressful, difficult situation. And, it's something that peer support has been working to address, because I think that for a really long time, the approach in the department has been, by and large, that, if someone's out on RFD, that person's kind of on an island. Like, there probably aren't a lot of people in the department that are taking time to reach out to them to see how they're doing, to check in on them. we don't have any kind of laid out protocol in place that puts us in touch with these people. But when we know about them, as best we can, I have myself and also encouraged other team members to make sure that these people are being reached out to, and that we, while we can't talk about the specifics of whatever the investigation is about, we can at least check in with them, see how they're doing, see if they need anything, other kinds of assistance or support that we may be able to provide that don't get into the muddy waters of, of talking about whatever investigation is still happening.
Good, thank you.
Now you I already feel like I'm forgetting. So yeah, Amber Gibbs did put in the chat to everyone. So CISM stands for Critical Incident Stress Management, which is a very broad kind of, I don't know what you would refer to it as, Lori, but like kind of a whole school of learning, a big umbrella term that entails a whole bunch of different stuff, but that in this specific context primarily entails the debriefings and diffusings that we've been referring to throughout the presentation. And lastly, having offenders that pass away by one means or another while on supervision. I would say that, especially during the past year when I've been the team leader, the year and change, we have been very fortunate to have a pretty good communication from district managers, from the field supervisors about when offenders that are on supervision in the field pass away. And I, on multiple occasions, and I know other people on my team that I've referred people to, we've had many people at field offices who have been contacted by peer support as a result of an offender passing away, because as the team has become more visible and more widely utilized by department staff, we've had people that are more readily willing to reach out to us and let us know, like, hey, this person had this happen with this offender on their caseload last week. They seem okay, or like they seem pretty upset about it, and we'll get contact information and we'll reach out to them. In my experience, a lot of the time, these people were maybe a little shaken up in the immediate aftermath, but overall, I think just knowing that someone is thinking of them and takes the time to reach out makes a huge difference.
Yeah,
Great.
and especially with the uptick in unfortunate overdose deaths as a result of COVID and lack of access to resources, we had, a couple months ago, there were a significant amount of individuals that had been recently released from the Chittenden facility that had passed away. And so we actually did a full response where we made ourselves available to staff for that entire day on the various shifts for anyone that wanted to have those conversations. And obviously, Burlington Probation and Parole and affected staff were reached out to as well.
Great. Thank you.
Nice to see you, Herb.
Yeah, good to see you. Good job on this, by the way, all of you.
And Diane, did you still have a question?
I did. First of all, I just want to thank you guys. It was an excellent presentation, very validating. I'm the Behavioral Health Clinical Director with the Connecticut Department of Corrections. And I came over from actually running the peer support program with the Massachusetts Department of Corrections. I came to Connecticut about 5 months before COVID hit, and to implement this program, and I'm currently building the team. So you actually answered a couple of my questions that I originally had. One was how many full-time members you have, and I know you mentioned you have several members in addition to their full-time duties. So I am interested if you have any full-time peer support specialists. How many staff do you provide services to, and does that include family members, loved ones, and retirees? I believe it does. Retirees you mentioned. And then lastly, confidentiality. You mentioned except if they, quote, break the law. And I'm sure you have individuals who you are working with substance use issues, dependency, addiction issues. If somebody reaches out for support around addiction issues, use of illicit substances, they're where they're technically breaking the law, how do you treat them and maintain their confidentiality in doing so?
Thank you. Thank you for your questions. I want to make sure that we cover them all. So Sarah did put in the chat. We do have 20. I didn't know the exact number off the top of my head, but yeah, so 25 people on the team right now that cover the entire department, which is roughly 1,000 people. Obviously, there's a little unevenness in the numbers there, which, you know, is something that we continue to try to work on. Every time we have a recruiting period, you know, we open that up to the entire department, and we get people from all over the state in various positions in the department that you know, will apply. I am hopeful that as we continue to do this work and continue to you know, establish our place in the department, that more people will be interested, and we'll be able to continue growing those numbers to a point where you know, we would like to at least have representation from our team in every facility and work site in the state at some point. Right now, that might seem like a lofty goal, but I know it's something that we want to continue working towards. Can you remind me again? I believe one of the other questions was
The confidentiality.
Yeah. So I think, and Lori, I would you feel free to chime in here, but I would say that would probably fall under you know, a thing. There'll be a situation where the team member would most likely want to say, okay, let's get you referred to someone whose confidentiality is better protected, because I don't think that we want our team members to be put in a situation where they're possibly, I mean, not, you know, there's no ideal way to handle a situation where a staff member might be disclosing that they're using illicit drugs. And we don't want a team member to be put in a situation where they're like made aware of, you know, a staff member that's using drugs while at work, which then of course is definitely something that needs to be reported. And you know, while we would want that staff member to get the help that they need, we want to do it in a way that protects everybody to the extent possible. So I would say that would be a situation where we would refer them to Lori or Beth, and that way they can have more confidentiality protection, as well as can be referred to what help they need to address that specific problem.
And I would say, and again, this is my bias, so I will put that out there, but I don't think a peer support team can run effectively without a clinician attached to the team that the team members have access to 24/7. There was a situation, and Sarah, you can speak about this too, but Sarah was one-on-one with somebody, and it was going in a direction that she was worried about. She stepped out, she called me, we discussed what to do next. And she handed that off very, very smoothly, so that she knew I was by a phone and ready to go. So, you know, it's just, you can't speak to how important it is to have that person that you can hand it off to, so that you don't leave somebody kind of just hanging.
Yeah, that was actually what I was going to mention. So I appreciate you bringing that up. But I think a lot of times we're in a scenario where you can kind of feel like, regardless of your training and you trying to keep the conversation on the rails, sometimes that individual is falling a little off the rails. And so that's why I was really appreciative of, you know, our team has always wanted to have a clinician attached to us. And I think we're a lot stronger as a result, because there's just work that liability wise and just in general, we're dealing with people's lives. And if we make the wrong decision, based off of not being 100% clinically minded, we could really impact people in a negative way. And so we're very fortunate.
And it doesn't mean that there's not liability attached to being a peer support team, but I think the more protocoled approach you have, and the more highly trained your people are in that protocoled approach, you're actually really damping out some of that liability, because it falls back on your training.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We're going to wrap this up because we're at like 7 after 2, and we want to be respectful of everyone's time. We want to thank our wonderful presenters. We appreciate all that you do. We would also like to thank the amazing folks at the NECCD who worked to make this training happen. NECCD is offering free webinar trainings throughout the year. Please take a moment to complete the brief survey that will be emailed out along with your certificates and let us know how we're doing. I would like to encourage you to check out our website, neccd.net, and sign up to become a member of the New England Council on Crime and Delinquency. Our members get access to our amazing trainings, conferences, and networking opportunities, as well as scholarship opportunities and discounted tuition at Southern New Hampshire University. You can also follow us on Facebook. Our next webinar, Responding to Human Trafficking and Exploitation, will be on July 21st, and registration is now open on Eventbrite. Registration will be limited. Please sign up early, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.